Hello, today we're going to step through the setup, configuration, and execution of a Sitecore Commerce OrderCloud integration with SAP ECC. When we step into Put It Forward, you're given the Platform Manager view. This is a bird's eye or operational view of everything that's running inside of an environment at one time. In this case here, you see several SAP integrations running in parallel to one another. The difference is that some of them are running at different frequencies, real time to once every hour, every 15 minutes to once a day, et cetera, at different times. Why you may have these things is that in this case with Sitecore orders, you want your orders processed in real time, and there's some other integrations that are running in parallel to that around inventory updates and catalogs and products, et cetera, as well as price changes, et cetera, that are coming from pricing masters and so on. To change the frequency of one of these, it's super easy. You kind of click the frequency button there, and then select the time or the frequency that you want it to run at in real time, once an hour, once a minute, once a day, once every Tuesday at 3:30 a.m. It's a very configuration function here. And it also equally in the bird's eye view gives you a view of how many times the integration is actually run at a time, if there's any exceptions, what the frequency is, and so on, and what volumes are going through these here. Green means good, red means there's been an exception, blue means it's in process, etc. So let's take a little tour of what's going on inside of Put It Forward here so you can see how to set up a Sitecore integration with SAP. We're going to click down to the top one just because it was at the top. This moves us into something we call Process Designer. Process Designer is really the integration engine or orchestration engine rather inside of Put It Forward. This allows you to orchestrate data flows in between multiple different systems and processes. Now, there are some instances where it could be within the same system itself, where you're trying to automate a sub-process and so on, and that's really outside of the scope of what we're talking about here today. But we're going to take a look at how we configure multiple different processes here and integrations that sit inside them. There are a number of different discrete functions inside a Process Designer that allow you to create multiple different versions of a process, et cetera, or change the flow of them or integrate them into other systems and so on. We're going to have a very quick example of here. We're going to clone a subset of some processes inside of this particular integration here. And we're going to do actually a couple times here just for fun, to illustrate the point of being able to have a one-to-many relationship in between Sitecore and multiple different SAP systems. Now, this could mean that you have a global instance of Sitecore and regional instances of SAP. Maybe you have one for Europe, one for North America, one from South America, one for Asia or Australia, what have you. This allows you to have the same integrations running, but perhaps with different rules in them, depending on the uniqueness of the environment that they may have, and or also be able to work with different versions of SAP or different versions of Sitecore in parallel to one another. Perhaps you're going through an SAP upgrade and you want to test your integrations in parallel in a non-production data flow. But maybe we're working with production data and you want to run these things in parallel to one another. This is an example of kind of how you do that. Stepping into one of these integrations here, we just select one of the bubbles or one of the process steps, and kind of click into Designer, and this shows you kind of the first step of what's happening inside of the Designer here. Now, on the left-hand side, you have the field mapping, and on the right-hand side, you have what happens to a record as it's flowing through an integration here. The purpose of this here is to show really kind of this is where the rubber hits the road and where the data logic, transformation logic, business logic, data quality checks, et cetera, are performed inside Put It Forward. Now, just to show a point here, this is what is consistent across multiple different steps inside of it. Now, I just stepped into the next step in the process flow here. This allows me to kind of see all the fields that are mapped. In this particular case here, I'm going to look for one that's unmapped, and there is a couple here at the bottom. When a field is unmapped, you're going to be presented with a link button. When you click the link button, or the link, as it were, it's going to give you a view of all the fields that are not mapped in this case. And to map a field, basically all you do is select the radio button, and then it becomes bound to the field that you are mapping it to. So there's no code required for that. It's really a kind of a quick pairing up and a name pair matching system around that. If you want to add maybe a function to that, you just can click the function button there, and this opens up a sub window where there's hundreds of different functions that are associated with that. Perhaps you want to add a date stamp to it, or you want to add a date stamp, and then you want to look for a substring in it, or et cetera. So you can add as many of these different types of functions to a field as it's flowing through the integration as you like. This is good for, normalizing things like country codes, or making sure fields are complete, or adding date stamps or enriching, or what have you. Now, I just want to undo this particular one here and revert it back to its natural state. On the right-hand side here, you'll see that there is some process flow here, and it's really a sub-process. And this is what's happening with a record as it's moving through the integration. There's a special source here. It's actually coming from an internal data object inside Put It Forward, which is outside the boundaries of what we're going to talk about today. But you have the ability to hold data in state inside Put It Forward and be able to manipulate it and work with it there. In this case here, there's a very special requirement that when you're pulling data outside of, Sitecore, it comes as, in the case of an order, it comes as a complete object. And in SAP, it needs to be able to handle it as a line item. And so you have to be able to, parse through that and find, the actual individual line item that you're looking for. And this logic on the record level takes care of that. It also has conditions inside of this, and you can add multiple different functions, et cetera, inside of this. And those are deeper conversations today. In this case, it's just making sure that the price type has a value greater than 0 and so on. It could also be any type of if this, then that, type of logic that you may want to apply to a record as it's flowing through this, and then ultimately map it into the, the destination inside of SAP. Stepping back into the platform manager here, we get to see again sort of where everything is at in terms of its running process. As I mentioned earlier, there's a couple in blue. This means they're in process and executing right now as we're speaking, and then the other ones are green, and so they are have executed successfully. They're one-day types of scenarios too. This brings us to the conclusion of how we set up, configure, and execute integrations inside of Put It Forward in between Sitecore and SAP.